Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Chasing Rabbits. My name is Scott Brown, and you have found my vlog dedicated to helping you become the leader you always wished that you had worked for. Well, tonight I want to talk a little bit about context. Yes, context. In every situation, no matter what we say or do, no matter what we hear or think, context matters. Context always matters. But oftentimes we get so wrapped up in the moment. We get so wrapped up in either the excitement of the win or the disappointment of a loss, we forget about context. And we think that the outcome was more important than the journey. It's not. We also tend to forget that winning and losing is very contextual. So let me give you a couple examples. Have you ever received the following feedback from someone? Hey, Jeff, great job today. Thank you. Wonderful job. Now, granted, your name might not be Jeff, and that might not matter to you, but the idea is the same. Great job doing what? What are they thankful for? There's no context to it. I've also heard this feedback. I'm disappointed in your performance. I expected more. In what regard? What are you disappointed in exactly? Was there something established to be disappointed? Was there something that was a prior conversation? Oftentimes that answer is absolutely not. It carries over to organizations as well. We often hear companies talk about, we're going to be the best. At what? How are you going to measure it? Who agreed to whatever this measure is that you're going to somehow determine that you're the best? What are you the best at? And when are you the best at it? And why are you the best at it? You can't be number one. You can't be the best. You can't be doing a great job unless you know the context behind those conversations. You can't just tell someone that they're doing well unless they know what the standard is. The standard matters. The context always matters. So let me give you a couple real life examples for where context really comes into play. So you know that I've started trying to do Weight Watchers again, and we bought a treadmill. I'm running again. I'm running 2 miles now. I'm able to run 2 miles straight, and that's a pretty good result. Or is it? See, 10 years ago, I ran a marathon. That's 26.2 miles. So in comparison to that measure, my 2 miles is pretty bad. A month ago, I could only run a quarter mile without stopping. So then the 2 miles is pretty good. But if I just say, I'm running 2 miles, all that is a statement of fact. It's not a statement of measure. You can't say, good job or bad job. It doesn't matter because there's no context. It's just a fact. Facts don't give you context. You need context to be able to determine if that fact is something to be celebrated or admonished. You don't know. And I bring this up because one of my favorite leadership speakers, it's a guy named Simon Sinek. And if you read his new book called The Infinite Game, he does an amazing job of laying out his thought process on how games are either infinite or finite. But one of the arguments he uses in there is something that I think lacks amazing context. He talks a lot about a guy named Milton Friedman who won the Nobel Prize for Economics back in the early 70s, I think 1970 or 71. And Friedman came up with this whole concept that the role of a business is to turn a profit and pay back the business by any means necessary as long as those means are legal. That the number one job of a business is to turn a profit. And Sinek talks about where are the ethics? Where's the context behind that? But as he lays out his argument for the Friedman thought process, he doesn't provide the context for what was happening in the world back then. One of the reasons why this was seen as so revolutionary in the early 1970s is because labor unions had grown so powerful that a lot of manufacturers had suddenly lost the ability to compete in changing markets. The steel industry had a huge problem when it came to their labor situation. They can no longer compete because they were saddled with these labor contracts that made it impossible for them to compete against robotics. It made it impossible for them to compete against speed and shipping and locale and labor costs at the time it was called third world countries, but now we know is just Southeast Asian countries. Because there is that shift, there is a shift in the market, U.S. steel manufacturers had a hard time competing. But when you think about the context of what Milton Friedman suggested, it was radical. It was, well, how dare we try to limit what a company can make? Of course, that's the way we should go. And a lot of business today still operates in that thought process. But at the time, it was a reaction to a context. Nowhere is that context talked about. All it's talked about is the thought for why we should be proposing that organizations should make as much money as possible as long as it's legal. Doesn't matter if it's ethical, it just doesn't matter, it's legal. And that's what Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize for. In the context, it made more sense. Like if it's to say that today, it's kind of a horrible thing to talk about. It's ethically, there's so many problems with it. But in 1970, it was revolutionary because it was opposed to a current situation. It was opposed to a current context. So context always matters. Whatever it is that you're talking about, make sure you include the context, because whatever you say is going to eventually have to be explained. And if you can't explain why your thought matters based on the context of the conversation, based on the context of the situation, then it's probably not worth having that conversation in the first place. So context matters. Whether it's celebrating somebody, admonishing somebody, proposing a new situation, or if you're just trying to improve your own situation. Context always matters. So until tomorrow, have a wonderful night, everyone. I look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow for another edition of Chasing Rabbits. Until then, have a great night, and as always, toast on, everybody. Toast on. Lenitra, fantastic seeing you tonight. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.